Hi, here's how you can set up restrictions for your Dean Vaughn quiz. First, go to Course Admin. From there, move on to Quizzes. Find the quiz you would like to edit. Click on the down button to open the drop-down menu, and then click on Edit. Next, go to the Restrictions tab. There are multiple restriction settings that you can configure here, so we'll go through them one by one. First, you can hide your test from users by checking this box. If you do that, this test will be completely hidden from your students. Next, you can manage overall quiz availability by setting up a start date, an end date, or a due date. A start date for your quiz will mark the date and time when your quiz becomes available to your students. If you set up a start date, your test will not be available to students before the start date. The end date marks a date and time when your test or quiz stops being available to your students. So if you set up a start date and an end date, you will restrict access to your test to these two dates. So your test will no longer be visible to your students after the end date. If you just want to set up a due date, you can also do that here. So just check the box next to Has Due Date, set a date and a time, and save changes. Your test will still be available to students and visible after the due date. If you choose to set up these different availability configurations, please make sure to never select start date, end date, and due date. Always use an end date or a due date. Next, you can set up password protection for this test. If you create a password and save changes, students won't be able to take this test unless they have a password. If you want to make sure students can only take the test, let's say from your school and not from home, you can set up an IP restriction. To do that, click on Add New IP Range, and in this case, you would get your school's IP address and then enter the IPv4 address here under IP range start, enter it again here under IP range end, and save changes. If you do that, students will only be able to take the test from the desired IP address or location, or in this case, from class. Next, you can set up a time limit for your test. So you have three options here: no time limit, recommended time limit, or enforced time limit. No time limit means obviously your students can just work and take the test whenever they want and for as long as they want. The recommended time limit is by default 120 minutes. This time limit will be displayed to students before the test begins, and you can also show them a timer. However, there are no real restrictions here. This is just a recommendation. If you really want to restrict access to the test and create an enforced time limit, select Enforced Time Limit, set a time limit and a grace period, and then decide what happens after the grace period. You can either allow the student to continue working, prevent the student from making any further changes, or allow the student to continue working but automatically score the attempt as 0 after an extended deadline. This extended deadline takes place after the grace period ends. So if you have a time limit of 120 minutes plus a 5-minute grace period, you can also add an extended deadline of 1, 5, 10, 15, 30, 45, 60, or 120 minutes, and then automatically score the attempt as 0 if the student goes over this extended deadline. When you're done setting up all these restrictions, click on Save and Close.